Hi, everybody. Welcome to this session on deliverability for e-commerce. We have with us four very, very amazing speakers who have really experienced in the world of deliverability. How about we start off by working around the room and getting everybody to introduce themselves. So, Dela, let's start with yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dela Quist. I'm CEO and founder of Alchemy Worx. I've been doing this forever. I started in email marketing around about 2000. I hate even saying that because it's kind of like, how much more knowledge can you get after 10 years? But anyway, so you can. I'm really focused on the marketing side of things. And so my encounters with deliverability are always generally on behalf of a brand that's selling legitimate email to a large number of customers, generally e-commerce. And that's my experience.
Cool. Thank you. Addy?
Hi, I'm Addy, aka Addy, and I'm a senior consultant at Holistic Email. We're a boutique agency that help brands with their email marketing strategy, their deliverability performance, email designs, and so much more. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here and to have some fruitful conversations this morning.
Great. Tejas?
Hi guys, I'm Tejas. I work as a product marketer for Netco Solutions. I recently transitioned into product marketing, but before I worked as an email deliverability expert for 3 years, inboxing some of the top brands from across the world and unicorns alike. So very happy to be here and very excited to discuss email deliverability with you guys.
Thank you. And Andrew?
On deliverability for more years than I probably care to remember. Both sender side and receiver side started off offering free email addresses to customers in the UK. First free email provider. Deliverability and people being upset about messages being blocked. And moved on from there to working with marketers and platforms and bring that we've already got an incredible panel here. I'm here in case there's any questions that I might be able to help with.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thanks, Andrew. I think your volume is quite low, so maybe see if we can boost it just in the interim. Just a little bit on myself. I'm Riaz Kanani. I'm the founder of Radiate B2B. I spent nowhere near as long in email as Dela. I spent about a decade in email and actually played a big part in deliverability over the years at Silverpop. I actually run a business called Radiate now, which brings some of the email techniques to advertising, but that's a topic for another day. So I thought the best place to kick off today was talking about the importance of deliverability to e-commerce vendors. How important is it? Is it something that e-commerce marketers should care about? And Tejas, why don't we start with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, for me, for just not for e-commerce, I think for any brand who is dependent on email as their primary revenue channel, email deliverability is like oxygen for them, right? Because your emails are only going to be seen by your customers only if they land in the inbox. I mean, no one checks the spam folder. So your customers will only be able to interact with your brand with the latest promotions or offers that we want to put in front of them. You want to get most of the brands in the e-commerce sector dependent on transactions on their email channel with their customers, and for some of them for repeat transactions right now, customer retention is the number one thing of 2020. So engaging with your audience and trying to have a brand connect with them requires your emails to be inboxed, and inboxing is a science. So yes, email deliverability is massively important for e-commerce marketers, and it should be the central part of any email program, irrespective of the field that you are in.
I agree. I think deliverability is incredibly important. That we're in the business of, essentially we're here to make money, and you need your emails to land in the inbox in order to see those conversions. Now, the number of conversions that you need is all relative to your business objectives, and your actual average order values. So you might not need that many of conversions eventually to hit your target. So what you do need is for a significant number of emails to land inside the inbox. And there is a significant difference between delivered and deliverability. And I think sometimes that's where the lines can be blurred with some marketeers. And so there definitely needs to be education for those who may not know the difference between the two. So having your emails delivered, so the ESP has done its job, it's sent all the emails, it's bish bash bosh, it's out the door. But like Tejas has said, how many of those are actually landed in the inbox? How many of those are going to have the propensity to then open to then increase revenues? So it's important to have that knowledge. You know, Dela feels as though it's not necessarily the marketer's job to worry about deliverability. It's the agency, but I think there has to be some form of shared responsibility in that. But that's my take on it. That's on Dela nodding away.
to head across to Dela, I think.
Oh, fine. I was kind of expecting to be dumped in last. So, is deliverability important for e-commerce? Absolutely. Is it central? Or should it be central to a marketer's thinking? That's a different question. So I'll give you a sort of couple of scenarios of where we can take it from. I have always advocated best practice at as high as you can get it for deliverability, right? Because deliverability begins and ends with your data. If you've got good data, it's fine. If you've got bad data, it's really hard to fix it. So if you're in a place where you've got good data, your delivery rates typically with the partner you're working with are in the 90s, 92, 93%. Does that make sense? You're an e-commerce brand, you're a known brand. You know, the sorts of people who are our clients typically. So e-commerce, known brand, all their customers are people who pretty much bought from them. They didn't do any stupid acquisition stuff or anything like that. And currently their deliverability is about 92%. Putting aside any debates about what really inbox placement is versus something else, put that aside. Let's just take a standard measurement and say inbox placement. At 92% deliverability, right, and you're typically in that 90 to 94 or whatever it is 10K better spent trying to get to 95% inbox placement or trying to get your average open rate up, which goes to like 80-90% of your list, from 12% to 14% or 10% to 12%, which is a 20% lift? So that's what I look at it. So if you're at a place where deliverability isn't a challenge, most people who do the right thing are in that place, then I would argue that 10K should not be the first thing on your mind when you wake up. Let me go and spend it on deliverability. I would say, let me improve my open rates, let me improve my content, let me understand my customers better, let me increase engagement, let me do all kinds of other things that generally tend towards good deliverability anyway, and not sit down and say, my biggest problem is deliverability, because it isn't. Now, if you have a deliverability problem and your inbox is about placement is 50%, 40%, 30% I've seen, Gmail's a nightmare, and 50, 60, 70% of your list is Gmail, then you've got a problem, and yes, it's central. But on the bell curve of clients, right, are those people in the middle where everybody is, or are they one of the outliers? And if they're an outlier, which I believe is mostly the case for the clients that we work with, then deliverability is important. It's not central, and it's something you do every day, and you start with and you end with, but it's not something you wake up and go, I'm going to change my life by focusing on deliverability.
Yeah. No, it makes complete sense. Andrew, do you have anything to add?
Well, there's nothing to argue with there, is there really? Things and you do. Yeah, undoubtedly, I agree with everything that everyone said so far. Got nothing to add there. You do the right things and increase your engagement, and you're going to improve your deliverability anyway. And if you're at 92%, you should really be focusing on delivering the most value to your subscribers. And deliverability will just come as part of that, where you might find yourself needing a deliverability guy is not when you're going to go out and buy a list or do something like that. I don't know if you end up doing for customer surveys and stuff, and treat those as transactional as opposed to necessarily marketing. There's little things there that you might have someone that can help you with. How do you stream your messages and things? There's little technical things there, but yeah, certainly not spending $10,000-$15,000 on how can we try and that by 1%. It's always for a marketer. If you're up there in the 90 to 94, then your primary objective should be what am I doing to increase my KPIs. So yeah, hands down, improve everything instead.
Yeah, no, agreed. Is it the same rules really for big e-commerce retailers compared to the smaller ones, or the ones using platforms like Shopify or BigCommerce, that sort of thing?
So what I've seen is if you're a large brand, you're definitely going to send more than 1 million emails, at least per month. And that means that you will definitely have a lot of users who are as much unengaged as they are engaged. So, over here, you definitely need to follow best practices in terms of your list hygiene, in terms of monitoring your bounce rates, monitoring your spam complaints, which users actually reporting you to spam, which users are not happy with your service, which users are engaging with you, having a really good sunset policy in place for large volume senders. And of course, you need to have a lot of segmentation for the mailing list as well. I mean, large volume senders, which are large e-commerce companies, generally have the segmentation in place. They know which is the right content to target to their right segments, and they generally invest a lot in analytics in order to get their message, tailor-made content for their audience. So over here, if you look at it, spam complaints, if I'm looking at 1 million users, and out of those, even 10% report my emails to spam, on Gmail, I'm going to have a problem in terms of inboxing. But if you're looking at a small volume sender, who has probably just 10,000 users, and he doesn't do any kind of segmentation because all his offers are around the same, and they do follow a good list hygiene, but they don't really need to worry so much about monitoring so deeply all these other metrics. I mean, they can get away with some things, but large volume senders definitely need to follow best practices every time they wish to send a campaign. And I also say that short volume senders, that doesn't mean that they're going to get away with having invalid IDs in the list, or they're going to hit a lot of hard bounces, they're going to spam their users with increasing their mailing frequency every time. It doesn't work like that. They still have to follow good practices. It's just that they can get away with some things which large volume senders can't.
Yeah.
Could you just put some levels around small and large vendors? Is there?
I'd say. Yeah, so a small volume sender will be more like a user who has, say, 100K list, 100K users, or large. We have worked with really large e-commerce brands who have like millions of users, and they get like 100K users subscribed to their brand every other month. So it's an ever-growing list because more and more users sign up for such large e-commerce companies like. They're like, so they're the Walmarts of the world, or, ASOS and all these other brands. So, those are the levels that I'm talking about.
Okay.
But even then still, I mean, I agree with you, but even then still, those larger email bases, they still only probably mail at least 30 to 40% of their base at any given time. So then again, deliverability potentially isn't necessarily a bigger issue for them because they tend to start looking at their more active database because, again, money is the driver and not necessarily anything else beyond the fact that they need to make money. So it's going to the most active, most engaged, and only when it comes to, like you said, key promotional times is when it then expands out. And that's usually the strategy that's used for most e-commerce brands. It's let's talk to the most engaged, the most active right now. Let's send them the most relevant product. So that's only a fraction of their database. When it comes to things like Black Friday, Christmas, any new product launch, they open it out. But that's when I feel as though the issue sometimes occurs is when they decide to go too deep into their list and there isn't a strategy for how deep they go and also the process in which they follow to make sure that if they want to speak to the entire base at any given time, what is the right, and using Dela's word, using common sense to make sure you're not attacking those inactives too fast and too soon. So that's when deliverability can become a problem because your ISPs are seeing a change in frequency, an immediate spike, which then can set off warnings. So I think big brands need to worry, but probably at times of seasonality and not necessarily as a BA, within their day-to-day, within BAU campaigns.
Can I? We'll come back to the unengaged and the active and inactive because I know we're going to be dealing with that in a bit, so I won't go there. But I do want to call out, Tejas, with much love, we always get on really well together. But the kinds of numbers that get thrown out that terrify people are what always concerns me. If you get 10% spam complaint rate, you should be shot, right? This is just simple. It doesn't happen. So we shouldn't put numbers out there that imply that that's possible except in the most stupid people or the most extreme circumstances, right? The point about it is spam complaint rates are even lower than unsubscribe rates, which are really, really low anyway most of the time. So again, I want to put things in context. 10% is not going to happen to most people that are in this conference because the sorts of people who get into that kind of trouble wouldn't pay to learn, right? They wouldn't want to learn from people like us because they don't care and it doesn't really matter. So I just want to be very careful about how we throw out those kind of numbers to make our point. I've never seen 10% spam complaint rate, partly because I'm not an ESP and partly because we wouldn't let our clients do that.
I was just saying 10% of your mailing list could actually be reporting you to spam. So I'm saying maybe on Gmail Postmaster it shows 0.10%. or whatever, but that's still a high number, and they still need to monitor the list.
No, 0.10. It's not as high a number as 10%. 0.10 is not high. So if someone's looking at 0.10, they're in a good place, right? Or they should be thinking about it. But it was just to try and put expectation levels that people can work with the sorts of people who are here or listening to us now.
Addy talked about frequency and the ramp up in volume around Black Friday and obviously Christmas. How much and how important is that sudden change in frequency affecting deliverability? And is it something you need to plan for, strategize over, or can you just do it and it doesn't make a difference? Andrew, do you want to kick off? You around? I think he's distracted.
Hey, so sorry, recap again on the question there. So
I was talking about frequency in the lead up to key events like Black Friday and
I think everyone tells you about consistency and making sure that everything is solid and don't deviate from the patterns and stuff. You're going to hear directly from block lists later today, founders of some of the biggest block lists. They're not stupid. They're human beings. They live the same lives as we do. And so, as Validity said in an earlier session, they know what happens at Christmas. They know what happens at Eid. They know what happens, in India for Diwali or what have you. They expect these spikes. They do expect to see these differences in volume. That's not to say it's not going to impact you a little bit. It's give and take, and they've got several resources and what have you that they need to manage, and you're not the only legitimate email marketer that wants to send a bunch of messages for Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and they have to deal with what they've got to work with. So you wouldn't find yourself being blocked, but you will find that the resources available to Yahoo and everyone else, that they are finite. Every service essentially, and so things will get a little bit stickier around those peak periods. I'd say it's expected, and maybe not deviating any of the time will look stranger than following the same patterns as every other e-commerce marketer that's out there. You can I think going back to what I said at the beginning, have a look at what the ROI is. It's a fantastic time of year for making money, and if you're going to have a huge spike in sales over Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and a slightly dipped inbox placement for a couple of weeks after that, well, is that couple of weeks a really slow part of your year? Deliverability really needs to be put into the picture alongside KPIs and everything else. We're, as Dela said, we're really not being stupid, and we're doing the right thing, and we've got permission. And so now, really, Deliverability needs to fit in as one piece of an overall jigsaw puzzle, and that is, how do I deliver the most value and get the most return from my list?
Yeah. Addy, do you have something to add?
No, I agree. I think when it comes to frequency, I think the way I always look at things is definitely from not necessarily always a consultant, but from a marketer point of view, because I've been a marketer before I was a consultant. So when it comes to, ramping up and frequency, it's good. You can ramp up during those busy periods, but you have to know when to call it a day. You have to have something in place to understand that it isn't a hard and fast rule. You may not see the impact of sending too deep immediately, because you might be on a sending high, but it's always good to look back and review. And I know that the esteemed viewers know this already, but sometimes when you're under pressure and you've got the commitments that you need to make in terms of your KPIs, you can start going hard and fast, and you forget the basics. You forget about throttling. You forget about, and again, even when you mail too deep, you have to remember that if you've got your segmentation correct, those that were technically inactive, dormant, or, whatever you class them, would immediately become active because of their engagement with you. So you're already re-engaging that, or repopulating your engaged and active base. So therefore, you've added to your base without actually having to go out and acquire new people. But you do need to know when to call it a day with the rest that just haven't been able to bite into the apple and join your comms. So that for me, I think Andrew is correct.
Is that something you should be looking out for when you've sort of hit a limit?
I think so. Definitely.
What are those things?
Oh, so you will definitely notice a dip in your engagement rates. So standard things like your open rates will dip, the click-through rates will dip. You'll also see a number of your active engaged users start to tail off. If you're, ranking people or scoring them by, the amount of something as simple as MailChimp, but I think there are other ESPs that do this where they score and rank your subscribers. So if you start to see the average ranking going down, then you'll be able to identify and see where you need to start making those changes. That I guess is like a signal warning that more needs to be done to protect your credibility and to protect your engagement rate.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tejas?
Yeah, I agree with Addy. I mean, monitor your engagement. In terms of your scaling your frequency up, I hope that your IPs are warmed up way before the holiday season. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to scale up your volumes that much. I mean, that's pretty much the rule that mailbox providers always monitor the kind of spikes in your volumes, and sudden spikes in volumes will definitely affect your deliverability. So in terms of scaling up your volumes, do it steadily, and in terms of frequency, just know what kind of frequency will suit your consumers, your most engaged users. If you want to have a survey with them, I'm not such a huge proponent of preference centers in terms of mailing frequency, but I'll just take a survey and take some feedback from the users, what is the ideal time that you want to be engaged with? How many times do you want to be engaged with? And not just send a mail every day to millions of users. I mean, that's just going to affect your deliverability. That could affect your deliverability in a bad way if they don't engage with you.
Yeah. I assume you're going to come to me, Riaz. Where do I begin? So the point about this is this is the difference between segmentation, which I think has come to the end of its useful life. As in, let me put it this way. For many of our clients, we're running 20, 25, 30 segments. If you're trying to tell me that running another 5 is going to make me a lot more money, that's not going to happen, right? So I think with many of our clients, we're already at the level of what segmentation can do. It's flattening. So the way around that is what we call audience management. Now, audience management means that you understand where everyone is. At the moment, what we do is, on Black Friday, what do? We go and pull our engagement list, engage list. We define engage, however you want to do it, 30-day open, bought, didn't buy, whatever, right? You set those parameters. Would everyone, hands up if you agree with me, on Black Friday, we go and pull the list, correct? Okay, now that list has 100,000, a million, it doesn't really matter, okay? But the point is, we treat it like an act of God. Now imagine a Christmas tree salesperson, right, for the holiday season, just going to the fields and going, oh, I've got 50 trees today. That's what I'm going to sell. Now, if you want to sell 10,000 trees this year, do you know when you need to start working on the virgin forest or your unengaged fields? 5 years before. So it's the same thing. If you want to have just 100,000 act of God, oh, I've got 100,000 engaged people, wonderful. You look at your engaged list 30 to 60 days out from Thanksgiving or 30, 60 days out from the holiday season or Black Friday, you go, oh, I pulled the list today, it's 100,000. That list should be 150,000 by Black Friday. So when I pull the list on Black Friday, it's 150,000. So you do the engagement at a time when you're bringing the most number of most valuable people to the table in one go. That's audience management. It's not an act of God. And to do that, you've got to mail into the list. So suddenly, it's not like Black Friday, you mail into the list. You've been gently warming your IPs, mailing deeper into the list, working out engagement strategies for 45 days to get to the place that on Black Friday, your VIP list, your best customer list, whatever it is 200,000 and not that act of God, 100,000 that we just accept. And this is a classic example of how thinking about deliverability can blind you to what the marketing opportunity is. All the things I'm talking about make deliverability less of a problem and less likely to happen on Black Friday because you're doing marketing stuff, right? Now, if you take it from the deliverability perspective, on Black Friday, you're going to go, fuck, excuse me, I've got to send some email, I want to mail data into the list. And you start jumping around and thinking, oh my God, what shall I do? What's the best offer for them? That's not how you audience manage. So for me, audience management is about altering the size of the engaged file to suit my big times, right? And it also means taking people out of engagement at a time. I'm going, you know what? I don't need to, just because they are engaged doesn't mean I should just keep hammering them for the next 3 months. I will need them on Valentine's Day, or I'll need them on Mother's Day. And so therefore I'm going to give them a break now. And that's audience management. And it's a big difference from segmentation. And it means that all of the issues that fall into deliverability are dealt with upfront. Does that make sense? You have the time, you're not under pressure, you have goals and KPIs. And that's a way of saying that if you let marketing drive your goals and you practice audience management to drive engagement across your whole database, so you know where everyone is at any given time, deliverability is way less of a problem than if you just go, okay, now it's Black Friday, I'm going to mail deep into the list and find anybody opened anything in the last 900 days and mail them all at once. That's stupid.
It's less about Sorry, go on, Addy. Go on.
I was just going to say, I like that marketing strategy or that approach to it, but I was just wondering, when someone starts to, I guess, warm up their database, let's say 45 days beforehand, on the day of that big day, what happens to everybody else? Because there is that contention between the marketer and C-suite. So essentially, they've gradually built up their active or their engaged users, right, by tapping into those dormant or less engaged over a period of time. But still, the numbers are not the huge numbers that they're expecting to hit in terms of the number.
Why would that be, right? So if someone comes to me and says...
Because they're only taking a proportion each time, right? Over those 45 days, it's a gradual proportion that you're taking and adding each time. But by that big day, you've only probably added, 10, 20% out of a potential,
Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. I hear what you're saying, but this is the thing. most people I talk to, their inactive file is bigger than their active file. Almost everybody. 60-40 is typical, right? But for the sake of argument, I'm going to say 50-50. So you've got 50-50. Now, your engaged file, you're not mailing all of them. Some bits you're mailing harder than the others. Now, here's the irony. For most clients that we speak to, 20% of their clients get 80% of all the email they send. Right. We come from an industry where we go, over mailing's a bad thing. Everyone hates email, so you've got to respect them and be nice to them. And then we take our best customers and we just hammer them, right? And then we take our people who hate us and then we go, let's treat them really nicely and not mail them until a future date. That's the first thing. So what we're actually doing is spreading the load. The second thing is we know the numbers. I can tell you now what the conversion rate is for the most engaged file, okay? So if, for the sake of argument, the conversion rate for that file is 5% and the conversion rate for another file is 1%, the most engaged file has 100,000 people in it, I'm going to get 5% conversion, average order value $100, you can calculate that number. I also know that if that highly engaged file is now 200,000, even if all those metrics go down, I'm going to deliver double the money. So when we sit down with the C-suite, we say, what's the number you want? And then we start working towards the number because I know all the metrics that fall into that equation. Okay. And there will be some, sorry?
I said it's like pulling those levers, right? So
yeah, that's why it's called audience management as opposed to pulling a file or segmentation, which is a different thing. Segmentation just is, it's like an act of God. Today it rained, tomorrow it won't rain, whatever, I couldn't do anything about it. But this is about saying, actually, it's not going to rain for 3 days, I'm going to get a watering can and I'm going to hand water my roses. That's the difference between audience management and segmentation. And the audience management person will find there's 50 roses on Valentine's Day and oh my God, it didn't rain for 30 days, he's going to have none.
But I like that analogy. I like the analogy.
I have a question.
Yes.
So like, do you keep on re-engaging those inactive audience who might necessarily be dormant audience, you know, from time to time in order to...
Actually, everybody goes inactive. This is the paradox. The paradox is we act as if there's engaged people who love us and there's unengaged people who hate us. Everybody is engaged for about 2 to 4 weeks either side of a purchase and unengaged the rest of the time. Now, if they buy off you once a week, that's a different thing, right? And so Amazon have a different engagement message. But if you sell insurance or Christmas trees or even jeans, where you'll buy twice a year or 3 times a year, what actually happens is that the pattern means people be engaged, they'll either buy or not buy. If they don't buy, they still go inactive. Do you know why? They bought off your competitor. So you've got that 4-week window to make the conversion yours and not your competitors. And we focus on knowing when that happens, how it happens, how long people stay unengaged. Does that make sense? How long they stay engaged, in which case, how long we have to make the sale. Because if we haven't made the sale in 3-4 weeks, they're going to go unengaged no matter what, and they're going to go into the inactive file. So that's the difference. Is by counting, you're seeing people moving in and out, and you suddenly realize that actually everyone on my list is engaged for about 1/10 of the year, and everybody on my list is unengaged largely for about 8-9 of the year. That's the reality. And so the segmentation strategy and saying active, inactive blinds you to that.
So on that basis, then, when you are getting to these key events, putting yourself in a position to be emailing the whole of that list, including all the inactives, would make sense. But you've got to manage your audience to get to that point, is what you're saying.
Yes, and then continue. So you manage your audience. So what you're saying is, you know something, I don't need all of them to be active for whenever the least, you know, for the sake of argument, you sell winter clothing, it's the middle of summer. Do you really need to have your entire audience engaged for spring to summer? Probably not. So you use your common sense in that way and say, let me give my entire audience a break for a bit, okay? Because this isn't my big sales time. And then I'm going to start ramping up and then ramping down. So it's about treating, and by the way, believe it or not, that's actually called dealing with your customers as individuals, right? Rather than treating them as a segment. Having said that, enough of anyone, enough individuals together become a segment. So it's the same thing, but the thinking is different.
Yeah.
I don't know. That sounds like seasonality marketing more than anything, because you still want to maintain that engagement throughout the year, because then,
at the same level,
window
at the same level,
maybe not at the same level, perhaps not like every day.
That's my point. Adiola, you're now doing what I think everyone should do, is sit down and say, does it make sense to hit or engage people at the same frequency in the run up to the winter as we do in the run up to summer when I have no summer clothes?
I do get that, but I just think perhaps the way that I had interpreted it is that you kind of just completely dial down, right? And then they only really hear from you when
they dial down email. That's never going to happen,
right? You're the same more email guy. That's how the fight. This doesn't make sense, Dela. But no, I agree. I do agree.
So just to counter this, one of the. Go on, Andrew. Have you got something to add?
Yeah, I'll just say that I had a conversation in the very early hours this morning about 1 o'clock with, I'll not name him because, he might not be want to be quoted on this, but a senior member of the anti-spam community, and pretty much very close to what Dela basically said, which was, I don't expect someone, and he used an extreme example, I don't expect someone that sells pyrotechnics to see the same level of engagement all through the year. And nor do I expect that guy to just stop emailing his clients. And so he expects to see some of that. But he did touch on, what Addy said, which is at the same time, ramping up towards, 5th of November in the UK, I expect to see more volume. I do expect to see him, taking a breath and a step back, or I would take a step back in the rest of the year. Keeping up some communication, but not necessarily as much as they would be, times. I think everyone's getting more sophisticated. That's what I'm saying from, hearing from everyone is marketers getting more sophisticated. The people that are running the anti-spam are getting more sophisticated. And hopefully events like this and some of the sessions that are going on later will allow people to get a better understanding and not have it filtered. So that's one of the things that I really want to get from Deliverability Summit, to bring more postmasters and more of these people to the fore, to hear from them, because they're not black and white. They're not cut and dry, and there is a lot of opportunity for people like Dela and Addy to work with you guys and get more from your lists. And there are easy answers. Cut. And your deliverability is going to increase, but it's still ROI at the end of the day. It's all the ROI.
Just on this topic of inactives, okay, you're managing the audience. You're working out, as Andrew said, in terms of upping the frequency in those key moments. But I remember that response rates are an important part of deliverability, right? Am I wrong saying that how people engage with your emails and interact with your emails is a part of deliverability? And so if that's the case, how do you have to take that into account? I think Dela, in previous conversations we've talked about the need to not just put all of your inactives at once. Tejas, do you want to start us off with your take on that?
So yeah, you're right in some way that subscriber engagement is the number one thing that mailbox providers look up to in order to make most of the spam filtering decisions. But as I said, that does not mean that you do not engage with your inactive list. I think, as Dela said, you need to keep on re-engaging with them from time to time, because even I think that there's a lot of shift in the users between your active and inactive lists. So, and that will keep on happening as long as you engage with your entire list. As Addy said, that's just seasonality marketing, but I think just not mailing them during the seasons, but also re-engaging with them from time to time, like asking them with some kind of feedback campaign as to what is the kind of content that you would like to receive from us, or like you haven't engaged with us for so much time, so what would you actually like to get in terms of your product offers, or would you like any informational content? So engagement is very important in terms of like, just don't keep your inactive list not engaged for like 3 months at a time, and then when suddenly big seasons like Diwali in India, or like Black Friday come in the US, and you just start engaging with all of them suddenly. And that basically what happened with most of the COVID-19 emails that went out. I mean, people were getting emails from brands that they haven't even seen in the inbox for a long time, just telling them that the employees are following all the right safety procedures and health procedures, and they're just like, I didn't even know I was still signed up to this brand till now. So engaging with them from time to time is very important. It's not just about the user just opening your emails and then just deleting them, because you don't know what that action is going to be like. But just trying to get them to click on your content, to have a brand connect with you, trying to resonate more with what they actually want to receive from you. So mailing highly personalized contextual content will actually get your inactive users to try to engage with you again. That's my take on it.
Addy, did you have something to?
Because I kept on going,
Give it away a little.
I was thinking about what you were saying.
Did you receive a lot of emails?
I agree. I was thinking about, as you were speaking, I was thinking about visualizing what you were saying in regards to maintaining that relationship with inactives, but that's essentially like a relationship strategy. So a bit like what Dela was saying is, the whole 45-day approach, but perhaps it's a little bit wider, where you drip feed them in bit by bit, you drip feed them in so that you're maintaining or creating that relationship, an ongoing relationship, as in, instead of that, hi, remember me campaign that comes once a year, or there may be, and God willing there isn't, but there may be another COVID curveball, and then, there's an increase of the amount of communications from brands again that you've never heard from before in a long time. So I definitely agree. I think engagement is important, and there is a way to manage that, and it doesn't necessarily always come from those that are active or superficially active. It's always great to reintroduce some of those unengaged to maintain that relationship, so your deliverability isn't hurt later on down the line.
Andrew?
Addy has pretty much hit it on the head from my perspective.
Yeah, I'm going to do a Dela.
How do you define inactive? And if you're turning around and defining inactive by, they haven't done anything for 90 days and therefore I'm not going to use them again, then that's a very, very poor approach. Taking a look at, the full customer journey and what your customer life cycle is, and the seasonality of your marketing and everything else, and taking that all into account is how you would, I would suggest you approach, how do I send, what messages do I send to what elements of my list at what point in time, and Dela hasn't talked about it. I know that the good marketers, and there's going to be plenty of those on the call here today, have access to other data points that they can pull in, and you can see what the impact is of your email marketing outside of just the opens and the clicks, and all of that needs to be factored in and taken into account.
Yes. Thanks, Andrew, for teeing that up. Absolutely right. So I'm going to kind of throw some numbers at you. And this is what you're saying. You actually have to look outside of just opens and clicks and even purchases that you directly attribute to email. So, and by the way, we have sort of the idea of audience management and dealing with a whole list all the time. So I come from the point of view that no one on your list, apart from people who've unsubscribed and bounced or any of those things. So outside of that, everyone on your list should get at least 2 emails a month. I advocate 1 a week. minimum. That way you don't have these sudden spurts and blah, 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 and you can do that by working through the file, right? So on no day does any more than 5 or 10% of your inactive list get a mailing, and you put that through in your other mailings and blah, blah, blah. So that's my first position. Why do I say that? Here's some numbers. They're not exact, but I wrote about it recently, and Andrew, I can send you links to all of these things I'm discussing. So we looked at a client, and we looked at their inactive file that they don't mail to, and those people spent money elsewhere, both in-store and various other channels, okay? And the average annual value of a customer who they didn't email was about $100. The annual value of customers who they mailed but had never opened an email was $300, okay? And the average value of a customer who had opened an email was $700. That tells you something really important about the value of sending email. It is 3 times the value of not sending an email in every other channel, but you have to look at the channels to understand it. Now, this is where it becomes even more interesting. Similar client, CRM retail, they had a situation where their engaged file, their super engaged file, typically opens at about 20%, right? Their rest of file, or inactive, does that make sense? Call it what you will, typically opens about 3%. Now, we then took the people in their active file and we looked at them open rate by how many days they've been active, right? In the first 15 days, people who opened within 15 days, the average open rate for that cohort is 25%. On the 17th day for this particular client, the average open rate for the cohort of people who last opened an email 17 days ago drops to 2%. That is lower than the average open rate of the inactive file. Now, how many people know enough about their data to be able to go and say, oh, on about the 17th day, if they haven't bought, I need to start thinking about moving them into a different file and treating them differently. And as soon as someone becomes active, I'm not going to wait 30 days till the next time I pull last opened in this number of days. Do you get what I mean? The minute they open, boom, they're going straight into, I've got 2 weeks to sell to them because they put their head above the parapet. That's kind of the way it works. So when I'm saying about active and inactive, it's a concept that I don't really understand, because everyone is sometimes active and sometimes inactive. So the question is, what's your mailing practice for them depending on where they are in the journey? And people berate me and say customer lifetime value and all of that. And most of those people can't even calculate what the average annual value of a customer is to them. So if you don't know that, and you don't know what happens when you don't know email people, and you don't know what happens when you do email people, your view to deliverability and what the value of your inactive file is changes tremendously. So if you've got, just to go back to those numbers, for that particular client, I'm going to pick 100,000. If they had a list of 100,000 inactives, right? Not mailing them, those 100,000 people would generate $100 times 100,000. It's about $1 million, okay? Sending them an email that they never opened suddenly changes that to $3.5 million, and getting them to open makes that list $7 million in value. And these are people we typically don't mail because they don't want to hear from us. That's why that's my feeling about the inactive file, because the inactive file is badly named. It's the people who currently don't want your product. How hard is that? Yeah. And if anyone thinks everyone wants their product all the time and therefore has to open every email they send, they need to wake up.
Yeah. Is there ever a reason to delete an email, Dela, from a list?
Sorry?
Is there ever a reason to delete somebody from your list?
No, except for if they unsubscribe. But this is where deliverability best practice comes into place, right? Ruthlessly remove any unsubscribe. Does that make sense? Never be tempted to remail them at a future date. Watch your bounces really, really careful. Never on a hard bounce. Understand your soft bounces better so that you can make better decisions, right? Have good practice on things like how people come onto your list. Yeah, so if you practice acquisition, then you have to behave differently from if the only way people come onto their list is if they came and bought off you and have just become a customer or legitimate interest or whatever it is. You've got to understand all of those things in order to do a good job. And so anyone who fails those tests, you should never mail. But if they don't unsubscribe, if they unsubscribe, obey it. But to sit down and say, I have the right to decide that Riaz doesn't need my email anymore, right? And we say, listen to customers, and he hasn't said a word, and I go, oh, I can imagine that Riaz is shouting at me, so I'm going to take him off the list. That's just stupid. let Riaz make his own decision to unsubscribe. And if they don't, something, they're actually just comfortable with the level that
Can I be a little controversial, perhaps? And I know we don't have much time, but in that essence, because I love when you speak, Dela, because I feel like there's so much like knowledge sharing, and I enjoy it. But what I was thinking as you were saying that is, to an extent, does that not bridge into GDPR territory in terms of having someone on there that hasn't really shown much interest for a certain amount of time and probably never will?
Sorry, GDPR does not define what showing interest is, right? It doesn't define that. It doesn't say, 2 opens a year is interest and 1.5 isn't interest. They don't do that. So in a way, and your own, through GDPR, your permission statement is driven by what you said you would do when they signed up, right? And if you say, I will continue to mail you until you say stop, then there isn't a GDPR implication whatsoever attached to that. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but that's my understanding.
Yeah.
But okay. I have a question for Dela. So essentially what you're saying is your mailing list doesn't really require a sunset policy of any kind. I mean, there should be some limit that you put in where you say, well, I have re-engaged with this guy so many times. He's not at all opening my email. Probably mailbox providers could see that as a negative signal where you're sending a lot of emails to users who are just not interested.
Good question. I've always said, it doesn't matter how many email addresses a person has, you should have on your list the address that's associated with their credit card, right? People don't change that email address that often. So the point about it is, unless they change their life completely, that person still exists if they are a good quality person to begin with. In terms of sunset policy, should you have one? When do you take them off? I've done it before, but no one comes close to it, right? So, and by the way, it's the same thing with email volume. We calculate that your open rate drops by 10% for every additional email you send, okay? So people who send 1 email a week, their open rate will always be higher than people who send 7 emails a week. And if you send 1 email a week and you change that to 2, your open rate will drop by 10%. So suddenly your open rate is 9%, right? And if you send another one, it drops, there'll be 8.1%, and it goes like that. And the question is, does it stop? And the answer is, I've never seen anyone who sends more than 30 emails a day, right? 30 emails a month very often. So because of that, it's hard to tell whether there's a finite limit. The same is true for sunsetting. I actually did this exercise, and it's what started me going on the inactive. I had a client that wouldn't listen to me when I used to say what everyone used to do, which is take the inactives off your list after 60 days, 90 days, 100 days. The client went, no. So me being Dela, I thought, I'll show you, right? By the way, back in the day, it was a mutual Silverpop client. It was Sky, right? So I took their list, and I'm going to give round numbers and approximate. So their list was about, let's put it this way, we found something like 2 million people who hadn't opened an email for a year, right? And I said, I'm going to separate it, and I'm going to mail the inactive file separately and the active file separately. And if everyone activates, I put them in the active file. If they inactive, they go over a year, I'll put them into a third file. So I never add to the existing file. Do you know that file opened at 2 to 3% for 3.5, nearly 4 years, right? It just kept going. And in the end, we ended up with like 300,000 people that had not opened for 4 years. Now, after that time, I could safely say, you know what? I think those people are dead. The other thing that I found out, which is a very interesting metric, and I've spoken to people about similar metrics, I call it the open to unsubscribe rate, right? When your open to unsubscribe rate goes over 50%, that's a dead list. So that means everybody who opens basically unsubscribes. That tells you something, and then you can take a decision. The other thing you can do, of course, is say 300,000. This costs me, I'm going to pick $1 a thousand to send. This costs me $300 to send. I make £450 in sales. It's worth doing. This cost me $300 to send. It makes me $200 in sales. Let me not send to that list anymore. But the point about it is almost nobody has ever run that. In fact, I think I'm the only person who's run that experiment for that long. And that's what made me become this is crazy. The client was right, I was wrong, right? And that doesn't happen very often. So I just changed, and that's when we started working out how to re-engage people and get better at it. And the other thing is, because we monitored it every week, we realized that some subject lines made people who hadn't opened for a long time open for the first time, right? Other subject lines didn't move the needle at all. So we got better at targeting the inactive with subject lines and approaches and offers that were more likely to engage than others.
And how was the inboxing for this inactive list?
It was fine. I mean, we're talking back in the day. It was. Remember, we didn't do the silly thing, right? So we didn't take it and mail it on a separate IP and kill ourselves. The client just wanted to mail their entire list. We mailed their entire list. Does that make sense? But I just tagged them separately so I would know who they were.
Everybody, I think we're out of time. Andrew, how are we doing time-wise? I know this session is due to run until 10 past.
I wish we weren't running out of time, but I think we're due to wrap up, and I could go on with this for another half hour quite happily. We've got Kate agreed to do a keynote very quickly, and then we have Alice Cornell from Change.org. So I don't want to be running late for Alice.
No.
We could pull this one out in a couple of minutes. That would be great. But this is gold, pure gold from you guys, and I'm definitely having Adiola and Dela on again. And let's thrash out some of these ideas and get to the nitty-gritty of it. I think it'll be fun.
I don't want to go head to head with Dela. I'm not wise enough yet.
Yes, it's lovely to be kept on my toes, guys.
Yeah. Thank you, Tejas, Addy, and Dela.
Thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you, Riaz.
Riaz, thank you.
Bye.
Glad to be here.
An awesome.
Thank you, Riaz. Bye, everybody.
Cheers, Tejas. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Riaz. Wouldn't have been possible without you. And Dela, cheers.
Yes, I think he's gone. See ya. Good luck with the rest.